AM 650 presents your source for leading-edge news and information on today's hottest products and services. This is Experts on Call on AM 650.
Welcome to Key Pacific's Talk About Strata. Good to have you back with us. I'm Sterling Fox, joined in studio by the Executive Director of the Condominium Homeowners Association of British Columbia, Vancouver Province columnist Tony Gioventu. Tony, welcome back. Good to see you again.
It's good to see you too, Sterling.
When all sorts of new buildings going up all over Metro Vancouver these days, a lot of them are condos, and a lot of them, of course, will eventually become stratas. At what point in a building's construction does the strata effect or the strata component actually kick in?
The Strata Corporation is created the minute that the developer files the strata plan in the Land Title Office. And the strata plan is the document that creates all the boundaries of all the strata lots, and that in turn creates all the titles so they can then turn around and sell the units to the buyers. So you can't physically buy it and take possession of it and move into it or take transfer of ownership of it until that the strata plan is actually filed.
Okay, so in the case of a building now, that would mean probably the building is just about completed, the sales office is open,
right,
and a few interested buyers have already showed up. Is the strata already in effect then?
It's probably not, and you may actually find that even 1, 2, 3 years in advance we might have pre-sales. People may have entered into contracts for the right to purchase that unit when the title's created and it becomes available. And you may even have delays in transfer of title for a variety of construction or permit reasons. So people might even be moving into the buildings and still not own the units physically themselves because the titles are not created.
Okay.
It's the feature of filing this strata plan, which is basically the map of the Strata Corporation showing all the units and the common property. That creates the titles. Once those titles are created, then the developer can legally sell you that strata lot.
In these days of dodgy economy and, interest rates that are doomed to rise inevitably, we're going to find situations whereby they'll have these advanced sales for these proposed condo apartment buildings. And somewhere along the line, Tony, somebody's not going to be able to build a building that they've already sold or pre-sold some units to. Yeah. What happens to those buyers who have bought a piece of a building that is never going to end up being built?
Well, they actually haven't bought a piece of the building. That's the misinformation or the myth in the industry. A pre-sale is not actually a sale. What it is, it's a contractor between the developer and a potential purchaser. And that contractor just entitles the purchaser to buy the unit at a specific set of conditions when the unit's actually built and it becomes available on the market. But you need to look very closely at the pre-sales agreements because there can be all kinds of caveats of changes of price or additional costs for construction or changes in design or allocation of space. So what you thought you were getting and what you do get may be quite different. And we certainly saw this in 2002 to 2007. People bought a pre-sale, they came up to it, and they actually they may have paid a bit more for it based on construction costs in the contract, but they suddenly realized that the $400,000 pre-sale arrangement that they'd negotiated is now worth $650,000. And so they either moved in or they sold that pre-sale agreement off to someone else, and they made some money on it. But the flip side of that is what happens when you sign into the pre-sale of $500,000 for a unit. The market comes along a year or two later, you put your down payment down, interest rates have gone up, and the price has dropped, and it's now worth $450,000.
And that's, a calamitous sort of possibility to contemplate, Tony, but I think it practical for people listening to this program who are contemplating becoming strata participants to consider, because it doesn't always go exactly as the script was written, does it?
Well, and pre-sales agreements have some very tricky wording, and the wording is really trying to anticipate what the future is going to look like. And so it has a certain amount of risk to protect the developer. It's going to try and anticipate the conditions of the market 1 or 2 years down the road. So those pre-sale agreements are something that really anyone who is interested in a pre-sale, take it to your lawyer before you sign on the dotted line, because they are very tricky agreements. agreements and contracts.
You're listening to Key Pacific's Talk About Strata. I'm Sterling Fox, joined by Tony Gioventu, Vancouver Province condo columnist. Tony is also the executive director of the Condominium Homeowners Association of BC. And boy, do you ever get a lot of email at choa.bc.ca. And we also, of course, are soliciting emails from our listeners here. And we want to focus for at least a portion of this broadcast, Tony, on insurance issues. And to that end, we have an email from Brenda in New Westminster that I would like to share with you and our listeners right now. Brenda writes, "We recently had a problem with our tenant and a flood in our unit. The washing machine that was installed by the developer had a pump leak and ended up in a huge flood. The insurance deductible was $10,000, and we have received a bill from the Strata Corporation. Are we legally required to pay the amount of the deductible?" asks Brenda in New Westminster. This is an interesting letter, Tony, because Brenda clearly doesn't live in the Strata unit in question. They have a tenant in there, and thus the problem originated with a third party.
Well, it originated with a third party, but nothing diminishes or decreases the liability of the landlord. Under the legislation, whenever you're dealing with costs or liabilities of tenants, the owner of the strata lot, the landlord, is ultimately the last line of defense, and they're going to be responsible for any costs. Bylaw violations, insurance deductibles, any costs related to that strata lot are ultimately going to be the responsibility of the landlord.
Oh, okay.
So that one there is the expectation of did the bill go to the right people? Yes, it did go to the right people. It went to the owners of the unit. But I think insurance and strata corporations can be complicated without having to be complicated.
Why would the insurance deductible for a single apartment unit for a flooded washing machine be $10,000, Tony? That's pretty steep.
Well, you'll see the average insurance deductible rates, and it's not for a single unit. It's for the strata corporation, for the whole building.
Yeah,
right?
And I got to keep thinking bigger picture all the way through this, because I'm siding with Brenda on this. She's got a problem, a flooded apartment, and suddenly somebody wants $10,000.
Well, and there are two basic policies in every building. The Strata Corporation, by requirement of the legislation, must maintain insurance both on its common assets and fixtures and on its general liability. So common assets and fixtures. Think about a building the day before you moved into a new building. Everything that was in that building that is not removable without diminishing or damaging the value of the building. So basically, the day before you move into the building, everything except for washers and dryers and basic appliances that are easily removable because they're just plugged in.
Sure.
The Strata insures everything. Everything is a common asset or a common fixture. The original flooring, the walls, the bathroom fixtures, the blinds that are attached to the building itself, that are the light fixtures, the structure of the building, the roofing. Everything is covered under the Strata's insurance policy as an asset. And under those common assets and fixtures, the Strata has to insure for the basic perils and all the things we insure for: flood, fire,
sure, yeah.
Water damage, impact by an aircraft, all the basic things that we insure for are those types of things that the Strata Corporation has to insure for.
Would earthquake be part of that here in the Lower Mainland, in this part of the Rim of Fire?
There's a list of optional insurance.
Oh, okay, and then the Strata company has to, or the Strata group has to make the decision: do we want earthquake coverage or not, and do the economics of it, right? Do the math.
Well, and let's come back to earthquake in a bit, because earthquake has some complications about it that people misunderstand.
But it's something that people think about a lot here, don't they?
Most policies include earthquake insurance. But the basic perils are what the Strata Corporation has to insure for, and they have to insure for all of the common assets and fixtures. In addition to that, the Strata Corporation has to maintain a liability insurance. So if somebody trips and falls on the property because of a garden hose or a cracked sidewalk, or there's an injury or something on the property, the Strata has some general liability for that.
Right.
The two most common options that people add on as additionals are earthquake insurance and directors and officers liability insurance, because we have a strata council and
Right.
they act as officers of the corporation. This is a liability blanket that helps to protect the strata corporation in the event that you're sued as a result of an error or omission under the Act.
So that's an option? That's interesting,
That's an
because
option.
if I live in a big apartment building that's a strata and I run for and win a seat on the strata council, suddenly an aspect of my new job is that I could possibly be sued by someone who's not the least bit impressed with the way the Strata Council has handled a certain issue.
It could have been something as simple as an error on disclosure of material to a potential buyer. Right? It could be something as simple as that no one was aware of. There was an omission, that a document was missing, or it didn't get attached, and as a result, it materially affects this purchase with this buyer. So it could turn around that you could have some liability. That's an option as well. And yes, as Strata Council and the corporation can be sued by strata owners or by third parties for a variety of reasons.
So do strata councils typically then go for adopting this optional protection clause regarding its council members and officers?
Most of the insurance policies for strata corporations automatically include this.
Oh, okay.
Unless it's been excluded specifically, and that can be as a result of a history of claims, or it can also be excluded because the strata community, you might be in a duplex and the owners just say, well, we're going to get the general insurance, but why are we getting directors and officers insurance?
Yeah, for
right?
two tenants
for
or
two
two
tenants.
occupants. Right?
Although there are circumstances certainly where it would have been valuable or important. So we go back to the strata corporation. So the strata corporation insured for all those basic assets.
Okay.
Now in Brenda's case, we come back to what isn't insured in her strata lot. Well, what was not insured in the strata lot was the washer, the dryer, and the basic appliances that were removable. And of course, anything that an owner brings into a strata lot is not insured by the strata corporation.
But Brenda says in her case, in her unit where the flood occurred, courtesy of the tenant, the washer was installed by the developer. It was part of the place that she bought.
Well, in the moment she purchased it, the liability of that washer and that dryer and any other appliances that she purchased that were her responsibility become her liability at the same time.
Because if the washer breaks down, the Strata Corporation isn't going to call the laundry repairman. Brenda has to.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And if she wants to sell the washer and replace it and buy a new one, she
No
can
problem.
do that as well.
Right. Okay.
But that washing machine and those units within the strata lot that may cause damage are the responsibility of the owner. The Act says that a strata corporation may recover the cost of a deductible if an owner is responsible for that. Well, whose appliance is it? It's Brenda's appliance. So if it's her appliance, she's going to be responsible for the outcome of any damage that it causes. So when you're in, so you have the strata corporation policy that covers the basic assets and liability of the whole building, and then you have homeowner policies. And homeowner policies are two parts. You have a homeowner policy and a tenant policy. So if you're a landlord, you're going to want to have very specific insurance that is going to cover some of the potential risks and liabilities for tenants.
Right.
If you're a homeowner living in there, you're going to want to make sure that all your personal property is covered, all your furniture, your personal liability is covered, and certainly you're going to want to make sure that your insurance policy that you have for your homeowner policy can cover what a potential deductible might be in the event you cause a flood or you're responsible for a flood in the
So
building.
the only way Brenda's off the hook for the $10K in this particular case is if she had additional insurance, homeowner's insurance,
Right.
that covered this mishap courtesy of her tenant.
Well, I certainly hope she does have it, because if she has it, and if the insurance itself actually covers the additional, then what is going to happen is she'll pay a small deductible, and her homeowner policy
Right.
or landlord policy is going to cover the $10,000 deductible. But we'll talk a bit more about the deductible, because I think that's a good indication of what's going on in a strata building.
Well, Brenda, Tony and I both have our fingers crossed that you have that extra homeowner's policy and you're not on the hook for, yikes, $10,000. Thanks for the email, though. We do appreciate that. We'll give the address to you a little later in the show should you have some questions for Tony here on Key Pacific's Talk About Strata. And we're back with more in a moment.
There's still more ahead with Experts on Call, the show focused on delivering relevant and beneficial consumer information. This is Experts on Call on AM 650.